Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale your from 10 million to 100 million and beyond as you up arrow your business and your personal life. Business Week called today's guest one of the most original thinkers in business today, and for good reason. Alan Gregerman is not your typical business strategist. He's an entrepreneur, award-winning keynote speaker, community builder, and the author of 4 best-selling books, including his latest, The Wisdom of Ignorance. Over the course of his career, Alan has partnered with more than 400 companies and organizations, from scrappy startups to global powerhouses, helping them unlock breakthrough ideas and measurable results. His talks, workshops, and writing have inspired over 700,000 people worldwide, challenging leaders to stop clinging to expertise and instead embrace what he calls enlightened ignorance. But Alan isn't just a thinker, he's a doer. From surviving a life-changing stroke and relearning how to speak, to rescuing dogs, kayaking the Swedish coast, and starting nonprofits that empower kids, his story is as human as it is visionary. Today, he joins us to challenge every e-commerce founder and executive listening to rethink what it really means to innovate, stay relevant, and lead in an uncertain future. Alan, welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast.
Oh, thank you. Well, I love the introduction. That was very kind. Yeah, no, I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to share some ideas with your audience.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to have you here. And I do want to give a shout out to James Bracken IV with Book Thinkers for putting us in touch to bring this episode out. James, thank you very much. I have one last interruption, then we're going to get it right into the good stuff. It is our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. Okay, I want to talk about your book. You've written that ignorance may or may not be bliss, but the right kind of ignorance can be genius. Can you unpack what you mean by enlightened ignorance and why it's especially relevant now?
Okay, great. Well, to do that, I need to step back a little bit. And the little bit is innovation is, my guess, important to everybody who's listening to your podcast. And every company talks about the power of innovation, but my guess is most companies do it wrong. And the reason I say they do it wrong is because they rely on kind of what they already know and the expertise they already have. And that might have gotten you into the market. But the truth is, in a world moving super fast, the half-life of what we know is really short. And so all of us need to embrace kind of a mindset, if you will, of being open to thinking in new ways. And so enlightened ignorance is really how I describe kind of 6 skills that are fundamental to kind of being open-minded and engaging the world around us and really kind of remaining resilient and relevant in a world changing really fast. And if you even think about e-commerce, the variety of offerings, the way those offerings happen, how they're supported, change all the time. So think about this. Even if I'm successful as an entrepreneur and I go in on a Monday and I say, damn, we're really good. The customers love what we do and we're getting new kind of buyers or new subscribers. And I'm feeling pretty darn good about what I do. The reality is maybe not this Monday or next Monday, but a few Mondays from now, somebody else is going to try and create kind of greater value in the opportunity that I've already been kind of attached to. And so I really need to pay attention to that. And I really need to be open-minded about each week. Can we do better? Mm-hmm. Can we offer better value? Can we support our products and services better? Can we resonate with the customer? Can we understand the customer more deeply? So there are a lot of things to think about. And I believe, quite honestly, kind of enlightened ignorance or beginning each day and saying, we don't know all the answers, but we know we can be better is really the start to doing that.
It reminds me of something that I talk about with our team here at Element, which is you go back to Amazon. A lot of people would have maybe stopped to say, hey, 2-day shipping, this is great. Like, this is the pinnacle of the fastest shipping we can ever get. But like, people are still going to want it even better, right? So can we get to same day shipping, 1 day shipping, same day shipping. Can we get it in an hour? And there's always going to be a push for things to get better, faster, more important. And so our goal, even as an agency, when we're serving our clients, is to simply say, where can we take it and how do we get there, versus saying, well, this is what the normal SLA is from every other agency. It's like, okay, so what? How can we do it even better?
No, I think you're right. And Amazon is a really good example. I mean, there's so many good examples, but think about this, is we used to be happy, of course, with 2-day shipping. And then we wanted to either pay extra or have an account that got us 1-day shipping. And I'm actually waiting for something that I ordered this morning that's going to come between 7 and 11 tonight. But step back a step. So if you think about Amazon, some of your audience will remember a company called Sears Roebuck, right?
Yep.
And so what did Sears do? Sears was a mail order business. Amazon's kind of a mail order business. Sears basically made it possible for people anywhere in America to actually get the same products that people who live in big cities get, as long as they were willing initially for the stagecoach to come to town. They were willing to wait for that, and then the train, and then a truck. And so Sears came up with this idea, and over time, the expectation for Sears was, can I get it quicker? Sears kind of dropped the ball, right? They had a nation of customers, and yet they ceded what they did to Amazon, and you're right, people keep expecting you to raise the bar, and it's in every single business. And so we need to stay connected to our customers. We need to make sure we understand what matters to them. And then we need to constantly be innovating or improving what we do to create greater value for them, because they're fickle. A lot of folks come to me and they say, well, our customers love us and what we offer. And I say, well, they love you and what you offer because they haven't found anything better yet. But I can guarantee you when they find something better, they might love you a little bit less.
For those young people who are listening who don't know what Sears is, I believe at one time they were the largest company in the entire world. They were number one on the indexes.
Oh, yeah. And they had an amazing catalog.
Yeah.
So people don't know it, but they can ask their parents or their grandparents.
Yep.
And so it came to your house and you look through this catalog and it was literally everything, not unlike the categories of Amazon. And you could say, oh, I want that. I need a new wheelbarrow. And so you'd order it and then you'd wait patiently for it to come. Well, we're not so patient now. But think about, there's so many examples. Think about Netflix, okay? So some of your listeners might remember when their parents took them into a Blockbuster store and they got a video. Then the folks at Netflix, entrepreneurs trying to figure out a new idea, realized that DVD technology, that's like a blast from the past.
Right.
Made it possible to send something that didn't weigh very much. And so they started mailing us movies that we wanted to see. So we didn't have to leave home. We didn't have to go to a store. We didn't have late fees. If they had continued to just mail us DVDs, they'd go out of business, right? So then what happened? Streaming happened. Okay, so everybody listens to the streams on their phone or their iPad or everything. And so streaming happened, but streaming is like a commodity. So think about how many of your listeners are in businesses which, if they're not careful, become commodities, okay? So the folks at Netflix said, well, streaming's a commodity. We've got to get people to stick to us. What are we going to do? And so they decided original content. We've got to create these shows that people feel so attached to that they'll buy this service from us, a commodity mostly. Last year, Netflix spent $18 billion to develop new content.
Love it.
So it's always a moving target, right? So we have to understand in any business we're in, it's always a moving target. We can't show up at work on a Monday and expect that the following Monday, the world's going to be the same.
Yeah. Here's an e-commerce correlation with that then for those listening too. There's a car parts company that we worked with. They sold a whole bunch of car parts, aftermarket car parts, soup up your ride. And I don't even know if that's what the kids call it these days anymore, but they also ended up coming up with their own parts as well, their own branded ones that they were sort of their own, but they were third-party retailers, so they're selling a bunch of other people's. And so to your point though, it's like, well, okay, but I can get that same part from a dozen different stores. And as it gets more and more competitive online and the shopping results get more and more competitive, how do we have something that's just uniquely ours, similar to what Netflix did? They said, well, we need to have our own parts. You can only get at our store. So now you come to our store, you can get this part and you can get our part. You go to the other store, you can only get that part. You can't get that part and our part. So come to our store instead, right? A lot of opportunities like that.
Well, I think there are, and I like to often say there are like 101 ways to differentiate anything, but we have to be creative in doing it. So imagine I have an online retailer that I buy things from, and what's their competitive advantage? Their competitive advantage is they send me a part, and with the part is a piece of paper that says, ready to install this part. Go to our video on our YouTube channel. It's video number 847, and be ready, and we'll walk you through doing that. So they've made it a lot easier for us, right? And so that's one way to differentiate. So there's so many different ways. So you're spot on when you suggest to people, you got to be different. So you got to be different. And even in being different, you got to keep raising the bar.
I love that. Speaking of, let's just say, breakthroughs, right? So you're talking about, Netflix is a breakthrough. We completely changed the way things were done. You use Airbnb, Spanx, and Uber as examples of breakthroughs that were born not from expertise, but from not knowing. Why do you think outsiders are often better positioned to disrupt industries than insiders?
Okay, no, I love this question. So think about this. It turns out if we know a lot about something, we can make it better. We can add an additional feature. We can figure out how to support it better. We can write a better technical manual. We can do a bunch of things that make it incrementally better. But if I want to create a breakthrough, I need to take a fresh look at something. So breakthroughs imply that I'm going to do something different than anybody else has done. My expertise implies that I'm going to do better things based on what I already know. So I like to think about the fact that the folks who actually shake up industries, reinvent what they do, actually start with a bit of a clean slate or not knowing stuff. So you gave some great examples. Uber disrupted the taxi cab business. The folks in the taxi cab business could have noticed that GPS or GIS technology had evolved and it could be applied to cabs. They didn't do that. They wandered around aimlessly, waiting to see if somebody on a corner was going to hail a ride. Okay, so two friends are in Paris on a winter night. They can't find a cab. One of them says, well, there's got to be a better way to get a ride. And the other says, well, there's technology now that can bring somebody with a car together with somebody who needs a ride, and we can pair people up and do it. That's how Uber got started, okay? Airbnb, two friends initially, eventually three friends, who all were design majors, okay? They had absolutely no experience in hospitality. They'd gone to the Rhode Island School of Design, a famous place, and they knew that a design conference was happening in San Francisco, and they also knew San Francisco was an expensive place to stay, and a lot of designers didn't make a lot of money. They decided to make their couch available, okay? So Airbnb, now the world's largest, by some measures, hospitality company, 9 million places you can stay, started as a couch surfing, a micro business couch surfing, in which folks said, you want to sleep in our living room and get a little bit of local knowledge from people who've lived in San Francisco not that long? We can do that. Spanx, so Sarah Blakely, she was doing two really odd things that your listeners will go, oh my goodness, are those things? She was selling fax machines door to door. Okay.
Wow.
So first, what's like a fax machine? Like, are there any people who still use a fax machine? Now, granted, there's a reasonable level of security in a fax machine, but nobody uses them. And door to door selling. I mean, my guess is your audience is getting to their customers in a very different way than door-to-door selling. She was selling these and was uncomfortable with how she looked because she thought that her underwear was kind of showing through her pants. She said, I got to solve this problem. So people who don't know a lot see a problem that matters to them, and then they just decide to figure it out. If I don't know a lot, I got to work hard to figure it out. And that's actually kind of a cool thing. So that's why I talk about the wisdom of ignorance, is not because I want people to be stupid, but because I want people to have the right kind of ignorance that inspires them to say, there's like a way better way to do this. Yeah, and so that's what I want people to think about. Not that your listeners who are experts in something aren't awesome, but there
Right.
gets to be a point when, as experts, what they see is this is pretty darn good. Let me make it better. And I feel like the future of opportunities has nothing to do with making something better and everything to do with making something that's really powerful.
I love that. Just a couple weeks ago, I had Jeff Webb on the podcast, and he started Varsity Spirit, which is like the cheerleading thing. But he actually started, the first cheerleading competition. He said at the time ESPN had like billiards, and that was about it. Like it was this like little upstart, thing, and he got it on ESPN. Kind of helped them build this. But similar to him, he just started doing cheer clinics to teach them fancy new moves to do. And they go, these are great moves, but we don't have uniforms that let us do this. He goes, okay, so we need to make better uniforms. He had no business making better uniforms. He just saw a problem. And then they're like, great, we've got these great new moves. We've got these awesome uniforms. We don't have anybody to do this for, right? And he's like, okay, well, let's make a competition where we can show the whole world everything that you're doing. And so it's just seeing a problem and saying, I don't know how to solve it, but I'm going to figure this out. And I like that idea of what I would say almost like lateral thinking, right? Where you're just like, I know this over in this area. What happens if I bring what I know in this domain into this domain that it's never existed before? What does that do?
Yeah, no, so that's a fantastic example. And think about this. I like to think about with all the companies we work with and all of the entrepreneurs that their brilliant idea is like the start of a journey. It's not the end of their journey. And if they keep their eyes open and pay attention, they can suddenly see the full potential of their ideas. Just launching an e-commerce website, it could be awesome, is a wonderful platform, but there's so much more you can do. And so you need to be open to that and realize that journey is going to continue to iterate and you're going to continue to add value. And as we talked about a few moments ago, if I stay connected with my customers, then I'm going to unlock other ideas, other needs they have that are related to what I'm doing that I can fill. Yeah, no.
How do you balance iteration versus innovation? Because I'd say like there's benefit to this, right? Like if we go back to the e-commerce businesses, Amazon being a great example of a lot of iteration, right? They're one of the most iterative companies, but a lot of businesses, it is good to say, it's like, well, how do you increment your traffic by another 10%? How do you get 10% better conversion rate? How do you just get 10% better average order value? Like there's a lot that can be done there, but like you said, you take your eye off the prize and miss that somebody just kind of crept into your backyard and out innovated you. How do you balance the two of these?
Yeah, no, so that's fair. So again, think about this. The folks who are listening have a business to run, and there's no reason to believe that their business isn't doing pretty well. And so to the extent that what you do resonates with your customers, you want to devote a certain amount of time to making it better, to making sure the stuff you already do delivers value. But you also want to spend some time testing some other ideas. So you want to think about the world of the customer that you're in, and what are some of their other potential unmet needs that are aligned. I mean, they're not going to buy ultra processed food from somebody who sells, IT equipment. Well, we shouldn't sell ultra processed food anyway.
Sure.
But what we want to say to ourselves is, what else could we be doing where we're credible, but we need to figure that out. And then I devote a certain amount of time to saying, let's think about innovating in those areas. Now, there's an advantage for folks right now, and that is that the expectation for a new product is relatively low. And so probably much of your audience has heard of the idea of minimally viable products or MVPs. And that means folks like us, all we need to do is get a 6-pack of IPA, some artisan pizza, and a few friends for a weekend and come up with an idea. And then on Monday, we share that idea with some customers. So in the past, folks used to say, I'm not launching this puppy until it's perfect, right? And so, and the most famous person who ever thought of the world that way was James Dyson, the vacuum cleaner guy. He wrote that he made 5,000 iterations or modifications before his cordless vacuum kind of
Wow.
hit the marketplace and it was showtime. Okay. We don't have to do that. The
Yeah.
reality is come up with a good idea. Do your best thinking over a weekend, share it with customers you trust, ask them to figure out how to make it better, spend the next weekend taking their ideas and applying them. And before you know it, you've got like an 80 or 90% valuable product that you can think about launching into the marketplace. But again, the two key things are be open-minded, don't be burdened by what you know, and talk to customers because they're the ones with actual needs.
Mhm.
I like to say to customers of all of the companies I work with, tell me what could be even more amazing. So I believe
Mm.
that you really like what they do, but tell me what could be even more amazing. In your wildest dreams, what could these people be doing that make you go, wow?
This is probably the best case that you could make for working on the business instead of in the business. I think it's
Right.
too easy if you're working in the business to miss those things. And you will do the iterations, and those are important. But you have to have the time that you set aside on purpose to say, I'm not focusing on that. I'm going to break away from that. I'm going to think just more higher level, more strategically about what's going on. And even potential brainstorms. I can see the value of you get a couple of other good entrepreneurs together in a room, and you say, hey, once a month, we're just going to just try to come up with as many ridiculously crazy ideas as we can, which is something that there's a guy, Akash, who runs genies.com. And I forget the exact name of it, but I think it's unnecessary innovations is a thing that he does where he's like, just how can you come up with an innovation of things that don't even like they didn't need to be innovated. And so he came up with these finger forks, and they're these little forks that you wear on your fingers. And you eat your food like that. It was completely unnecessary, but it was just to practice that idea of just like thinking so far outside the box that's practical to just say, what if?
Well, no, so I like that. So we've done exercises with folks in which we've asked them to think about. So I love that idea. We've asked them to think about, come up with a totally different way to eat or a totally different way to consume content or whatever the case is. So challenging yourself to think that way, I think, is important. But then the other thing you talked about is if I were getting a group of friends together, I would get a group of friends from different industries and different backgrounds because their ideas and inspiration are going to kind of spark our own best thinking. And if we went back to the Netflix idea, they didn't begin by thinking about creating Netflix. They began, two Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, by simply thinking about, is there an idea out here that we can grow to scale and make money on? And they farted around. Can I use the word fart? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So they farted around with all these ideas, and then they came up with this idea of mailing DVDs to people. But it wasn't like they started out and said, let's compete with Blockbuster.
Right.
It was, let's come on. And I think, your audience, it's a lot of very entrepreneurial people. They're looking for ideas and opportunities. So the reality is, think about your core business, always make it better and more valuable for your customers, but imagine what else you can do that really matters. And if it's somewhat related, then you're credible. You can talk to customers right away about it.
I love that. You told me the other day that half of the Fortune 500 companies from 20 years ago no longer exist. What's the biggest blind spot that leaders today are repeating?
Well, so there's a lot, of course. So, they misread the market or they don't pay enough attention to the market. So they assume and think about it. And I'm guessing for a lot of people listening, you're successful today. Why would I change? So here is somebody saying, you're going to have to be different in the future. And you go, I'm doing great right now. We're getting a lot more subscribers. A lot of people are buying our stuff, whatever our stuff is. And so I really don't feel like I need to change. And so I think it's that mindset that we're actually really, really good. Now, that mindset's tied to expertise is we're doing what we know. We've assembled the right experts. We're golden. We can kind of do that. So that's a kind of problem. Another problem is that we're not humble as leaders, So I would argue the best thing that any leader can do with their group, whether their group is 5 people or 100 people, is periodically sit down and say, you know, we don't know the answer to this. We don't know the best way to do this. That's okay. We need to figure out the best way. We need collectively to figure out the best way. So I want us as a team to go on a journey to figure out the best way. So I think that's really important. I think also people underestimate their competitors, okay? They did a competitor assessment. They've determined, oh, we're so much better than those folks. And so then they just assume that the competitors are insignificant. Well, first, some of your existing competitors are better than you realize. But second, you're more likely to be disrupted by somebody who was never kind of in your business than you are by an existing competitor.
Great point.
And so you have to be, you know, I talk about these 6 things and we'll get into them because we have time in the book that form enlightened ignorance. But one of the things I talk about is the idea of being paranoid, you know, and that doesn't have a great connotation, but here's what the idea of paranoid means. It means somebody is always following us, okay? And it's in our interest to regularly turn around and imagine who could be following us. So I have a customer and their business for many, many years was remarkable. It was a few $100 million a year. They did energy efficiency business. And so they partnered with utilities, and utilities would hire them to go into homes and wander through homes and do an assessment of where they were leaking energy and how they could be more efficient. So the utility could say, here's some improvements you can make. And they were thinking about who are the other companies that are doing this. And there were some other good companies, but not of their scale. A company comes along with a technology in which they literally can drive down a street with a heat sensing camera and take a picture of a house and see where it's leaking energy. And so they propose, you know, we don't have to set up an appointment. We don't have to come to your house. It's way cheaper to do this. And then our system will then tell you, based on where we see from this heat map, energy leaking, exactly where you should make an investment and how much money you're going to save. Suddenly they go, whoa, didn't see that coming. And so I don't want your listeners to be at a point where they say, didn't see that coming. And so part of that is being a bit paranoid. And so what does that mean? I got to get out there. I got to pay attention. I got to go to shows where people are kind of offering new ideas. I got to read a lot. You know, I got to ask people who haven't been my customer, who are you using and why? I just got to be engaged and know things so I don't get blindsided.
When I started off working in startup world, VC-backed company, SaaS company, one of the things that we would do is, you know, if somebody asked us about one of the competitors, is we'd say, I don't know who that is, but you know, just disregard it. It could be a big competitor, right? But you just, I don't know. Maybe they play at our space. I don't know, right? And it was just disregard it. And it was somewhat tongue in cheek, having a little bit of fun with it, right? But at the same time, that's the opposite of paranoia, right? And so I think you know what you're helping me to see is it's like that's probably the wrong approach. It's like you need to be aware of who these people are. You need to be a little bit paranoid of them. How do you develop, let's say, healthy paranoia? How do you develop that?
Well, so I think paranoia is like a human trait. I mean, we're actually kind of born and wired to be a bit paranoid. I mean, think about, you know, when we had dreams or nightmares as kids. Think about the book, one of my favorite books that was a really bad movie, Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah.
You know, so Where the Wild Things Are. So Max, a kid, behaves poorly. He's banished to his room. I don't know why. And then he suddenly sees his room filling up with monsters, and his job is to kind of win them over. Okay. So I think it's like a human thing to be a bit paranoid or worried about the worst possibly happening. We need to use that to our advantage. Sure. And so that is, we need to realize that we always need a wake-up call. And that wake-up call means we just got to engage the marketplace better than we do. My fear for some e-commerce businesses is that they spend too much time wherever they're located, either in their fulfillment center or working remotely, and they don't get out and pay attention to a lot of the things that are going on out there. Because the world of e-commerce, it's different now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And so I'm buying things from different places than I used to. Our company is buying things from they have different business models that support them. I mean, even think about, you mentioned SaaS. The cloud, that's like we have all of our stuff in the cloud. Somebody asks me for like a document and I go, oh, there's not like a piece of paper with any of that. It's all kind of in the cloud now.
Yeah.
Think about, Amazon, of course, the biggest of e-commerce companies. So they did a lot of things to improve delivery, but they do some other things. They're really good at data mining and data science. And so they actually pay attention to that much better than other companies do. And so I'd argue if you're not going to hang out with your customers, collect a lot of data and actually analyze it and think about it. Okay. So I buy for myself and my wife, who's from Sweden, a lot of this genre called Nordic murder mysteries. Okay. And so it's actually good if you like to read mysteries that have a murder involved. I started buying these books. Amazon goes through all my data. Whenever a new Nordic murder mystery comes out, they send me an email. They say, you've bought these before. Do you think you'd like to do that? Now, contrast that, and they're a big customer of mine, Marriott, one of the largest hotel companies in the world. And for the longest time, I've been saying to them, you ought to take all my data. You have like years of me traveling, and you ought to try and figure out how to customize. We can do this now with AI. We can absolutely customize. Let's say Marriott has 60 million customers. They could send them each an individualized message. AI allows them to do that. Okay. But instead, what does Marriott do? It gets to be winter. They send me the same generic message. It's getting cold in the Northeast. Would you like to go to a resort? Well, the truth is, I don't go to resorts. I'm like a city guy. I like to go to museums. I like restaurants. I like to go to concerts. And they don't even know enough about me with 30 years of records of my travel to send me something and say, gee, we see every winter you go to like a city and you go to theater and you ask the concierge about this. So that's frustrating. So that's why I like Amazon. The folks at Chewy, so I have 3 dogs, okay, or we have 3 dogs. So Chewy is really important to me. And so when a new product comes up, the folks at Chewy send me a message and they say, so Alan, there's something that your dogs might enjoy. Do you want to try this? Or we have pharmacy now. You don't have to use us in a separate pharmacy. So people who are paying attention to their customers, whether it's hanging out with them or collecting data and analyzing it, are the ones who are going to win.
Yeah. You have 3 dogs. I have 3 dogs as well. They're Cocker Spaniels. We have the mom and the dad, and we kept one of the babies now. They have formed their own pack, and so
sure, they don't need you other than to feed them.
Yeah. So, what kind of dogs do you have?
So we have 3 rescued dogs. So we like a kind of breed of dog called flat-coated retrievers. So if anyone looks them up, they look like black golden retrievers. They're actually wonderful, sweet dogs and beautiful. We had a purebred. Then we decided to go back to rescuing dogs. We rescued a couple of them. And then the oldest one passed away. We rescued another one from a kill shelter in Kentucky. We went to pick her up. She came out of kind of a rusty, grungy van. She was covered with bugs, and they gave us a space certificate. And 5 weeks later, she had 7 puppies in our bedroom. And so we kept one of the puppies. We were told you only want to keep one of the puppies from a litter. So we kept one of the puppies that doesn't look at all like her. It's given us the opportunity, I don't know how many of your listeners are in Kentucky, to come up with the idea of a Kentucky spay, which is a little bit different than a spay in some other places. Yeah. So that was amazing, but I have to be honest. So we're talking about the fact that we live in an uncertain world. So, of course, we didn't plan on having puppies. The 10 weeks of raising these puppies before we found homes for them was one of the most delightful things I have ever done. You'd clean their pen. We kind of made the basement their pen. And then once you'd cleaned, you'd had 7 puppies crawling all over you. So after 2 hours, I realized I had to go back to work. Yeah, it's all good.
That's hard to do. I like that you started digging into paranoia here a little bit. I want to dig into the other 6 essential gifts here, these innate gifts that you identified. I want to go through each one of them, and then I want to go kind of one by one here. But so the 6 that I got, make sure I got them right here: purpose, curiosity, humility, respect, future focus, and paranoia. We touched on paranoia a little bit. When I come back to purpose, then, how can e-commerce brands move from just selling products to building purpose-driven loyalty?
Okay, perfect. So let's first step back and think about purpose. And I hope everyone listening understands that in the absence of having a clear and compelling purpose, you just can't win long-term in business.
Sure.
So purpose is what should drive us. We don't exactly know everything we need to do to live our purpose, but purpose drives us. Purpose is what we share with everybody on our team, and we say, we need to come up with new ideas tied to this purpose. We don't say to everybody on our team, we need to be brilliant and creative and innovative. We'll get a lot of random cats and dogs. I'm coming back from working with a customer in India. I'm at the airport in Delhi, and there's a table that has a box that says suggestion box. Tell us how we can be better. My guess is a lot of people are filling out stuff. Nothing's going to happen. And it's because they haven't made clear to us, this is what we're trying to do.
Sure.
We're trying to be the fastest, easiest, most seamless airport to travel through, whatever the case is. You tell me that stuff, I'll give you my ideas. You tell me whatever, I'll say, well, I'd like a healthier choice in the vending machine. So, okay, so purpose should drive us, and we all should have a compelling purpose. And that purpose should be something we wake up trying to do. It's not the products we sell. It's what we do to make the customers' lives better or more remarkable. So I'd love everybody to start with that. If they start with that, that then aims our focus. We have a target to shoot at. I mean, think about this. And I don't know how many of you go to target ranges. So I was recently at a place where I could learn to shoot a bow and arrow. And they said, okay, there's the target. The target was helpful. Imagine I went to that place, they gave me a bow and arrow, and there was no target. I would just tell everybody to kind of move pretty quickly out of the way. But anyway, yeah. So purpose gives a direction. That then drives the other thing. So the second thing is curiosity. Now I want to be curious about hitting that target, figuring out all the ways I can deliver value and hit that target. And so I use my curiosity, I turn it on, and I say to myself, there's a world of ideas and inspiration. Now let me step back, and this is, I don't know if it's going to blow the mind of the people who are listening, but this is the most important fact I'd like people to think about, and that is what I call the 99% rule. 99% of all new ideas throughout history are based on someone else's thinking or something somebody saw in nature. Okay? So that has profound implications for how I innovate. Because if that's the way the world works, why would I sit around a table with experts and say, okay, does anybody have an out-of-the-box idea? I don't need a totally original idea. I need to find a brilliant idea and adapt it to my world. So if that's the case, curiosity should say to us, let's get out of the office and look for brilliant ideas. Let's look around and see what are other people doing. How are they meeting the needs of their customers? How do they help their customers to think differently? So now think about if I'm in e-commerce, and one of my knocks on e-commerce, I probably shouldn't say this on your podcast, but one of my knocks is it's so uneven how e-commerce companies support their products and services. So some give me like a chat that then says this is AI generated. And so I pretty quickly know the limits of this kind of chatbot and what I'm going to learn. And then I need to say, okay, fine. What's a phone number where I actually get a human? Others give you a human because they care. Others say, we've put up a lot of information that will help you to solve this problem. And we understand your problem. We don't understand that you want to go through 500 frequently asked questions. We understand your issue. And here is the 2-pager on how you solve your issue, whatever the case is. But the reality is, if I want to be awesome at supporting customers, then I need to think about a model that customers are going to appreciate based on what matters to customers. And it could be high touch. If I'm selling stuff that's pretty valuable, customer has a right to expect that I get to talk to somebody who's fairly smart about it. And so if I'm going to buy, high-end audio equipment or a camera or something like that, I can go into a store and talk to people. I ought to be able to online or through calling to actually get somebody who knows a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I love I love lots of companies, of course, but I'm a big fan of this company called REI, Recreational Equipment. It's the world's largest kind of outdoor cooperative. What do I love about REI? They focus on 6 different things you can do outdoors. You can hike, you can camp, you can bike, you can, I'm missing the other. You can run, you can do a bunch of things. Okay. Everyone who works in a department at REI is an enthusiast in that sport.
Sure.
If I'm in the bike part of REI, I ride regularly. So when someone comes in, I not only know a lot, but I'm passionate about it. Okay. So I'd like to have an e-commerce company connect me with someone who's passionate about the challenge I'm trying to solve. Then I'll feel like, whoa, they're really there for me. Some of your listeners have probably gone to this amazingly ginormous Swedish store called IKEA. Okay. And so IKEA, the world's largest home furnishing store. IKEA is also really renowned for providing not such a great level of actual customer service, but actually doing a lot of thinking behind the scenes. So you don't need them. Because what's IKEA's whole kind of purpose? To enable you to have a beautiful place, and you do it yourself. It's kind of a DIY kind of place. So what does IKEA do? Well, they know in every one of their stores, they've gone around that geography to look at the typical size of apartments and rooms, and they customize the groupings of their furniture based on those sizes. So it's going to be different in Minneapolis or Seattle or San Francisco or New York or India. And so they make room settings that you can look at and picture yourself in there, and it's actually going to fit in an apartment where you live. So that's one thing they do. They also give you some tools so you can measure things, draw things, think about things. They make it easy for you to take something out of easy. There are a lot of memes that talk about how challenging it is to put together IKEA furniture. But their whole idea is our purpose is kind of do-it-yourself, low-cost furniture. So now they have to think about how they do that brilliantly. And of course, you can get somebody if you need to, but that's not their main focus. They're going to make it so that I don't need somebody. Right. I can go home and do it. So I think all of us need to think about the fact that curiosity should stretch to all kinds of folks in all different kinds of businesses. Folks should leave their office and they should look for remarkable kind of places and ideas and then say to themselves, what's remarkable? I walk around with a little journal every day. And when I see something remarkable, I write it down. And then I say to myself, can I use this to help one of our customers? Is this a way to get our customer to think differently? But your folks listening should go around, wander around. It's actually fun to do too. Go to new businesses, go to places with new business models, go to museums that talk about kind of technology and ideas, go to hip neighborhoods and see, are there some practices people are connecting with? You go into a restaurant today, a new restaurant, and there's a QR code you scan, right? Because they don't want to print up menus. That's fine. So you scan that. Some of them even just have you order on your phone because they don't want to deal with you. I'm not certain I like that idea, but
I don't either.
Yeah, but it's happening. So, and I simply want to know about that and see if people are kind of enjoying that, okay? Because if people are enjoying that, maybe that's something I need to do. Maybe I need to have a QR code that takes somebody someplace and solves something for them. I don't know the answer, but I want to wander around and do that. I take people to performances. I take them to see kind of artists that they've never heard of who are new, and I try and get them to figure out kind of what are they doing that's different. Business is about being different. We need to expose ourselves to all these different things and then figure out what are the best. Think about this. Some of your audience probably has attended a performance of Cirque du Soleil.
Sure.
So I take corporate teams to Cirque du Soleil performances. Do I understand what's going on or the language they've created? Probably not. But I do understand this. We go half an hour to 45 minutes before, and I ask people to do this, and that is write down everything they see that's part of the entire experience of going, it's not just the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's when I arrive. It's how people greet me. It's how I get seated. It's how the audience is engaged in the performance. It's how they wrap up the performance. It's how they sell their swag afterwards. And then I simply say this: business, no matter what kind of business, e-commerce or anything else, is a performance. And so you need to understand the steps in your performance and make them all awesome, because the initial steps before somebody even buys from you are building awareness, getting them excited, and getting them willing to change and try you. Then the steps after that are, stick with me. I got something new for you. So, I just like people to get up and experience the world, because they're going to get ideas.
I feel like you've developed what I would almost call like this structured, active curiosity, right? Like, it's not, you don't just end up going to the Cirque du Soleil and it's like, hey, so we went to Cirque du Soleil, and it's like, but there was no plan. And so, if I just took people there and had no plan, then it's like, well, you walk away with nothing. But this is like a structured, active curiosity as you're going through it. And I love that approach that you had of just thinking through the whole experience all the way through. You could do that at a lot of different places and think through, what do I like about this? What do I like about that? Going to the restaurant, like you said, you can go to all of these different events and venues and situations and say, what do I like? What do I dislike about it? And then apply that to a completely different business like e-commerce and say, well, what can I take from this restaurant experience? How can I take what I like there and make that into my e-commerce business? How can I take what's going on at Cirque du Soleil and bring that to my e-commerce business? And like you said, even outside of other people's thinkings, it's even nature, right? Where it's like, I think one of the bombers that we made was based on like a peregrine falcon or something, right? Because it's just so stealth-like. You're like, how can I take what nature is doing, right? And so it's like, what do we love about nature? The trees, the green, the whatever, right? How do I bring that into my e-commerce business? All these different facets.
Well, that's a better way to innovate, right? Because it's better to take ideas that are proven somewhere and see if they make sense in our business than it is to come up with something remarkable. I mean, ideas abound. So some companies still endure even in a world with e-commerce, and one of them, companies like Macy's struggle, but companies like Nordstrom thrive. Why did they do that? Because they're renowned for customer service. They've been renowned since 1920 for customer service. What happens at Nordstrom? I buy something and the salesperson comes out from behind the counter, wraps it nicely, hands it to me, and says, if you ever need anything else, I'm always here for you, okay? That has a direct corollary with e-commerce. We just have to online figure out how to create that same experience. I remember having an e-commerce experience where I bought something and it wasn't even a big ticket item. And then I get an email, and the email I thought was delightful. The email said, just wanted you to know, Alan, that our entire team here was so excited about you buying our product that we all wrapped it together in our favorite wrapping. Then we went outside to the center of town and held a parade in your honor. We marched down the street. Now, I know they didn't do that, but damn, did I think these people are clever. I feel really cool about that. So again, there's so many ways to differentiate what we do, and we're only limited by kind of our imagination. You mentioned nature. So probably everyone in the modern or Western world has some product, whether it's a raincoat or something else, that uses Velcro, okay? And so we say to ourselves, God, what a genius thing. This must have been like folks wearing lab coats, sitting in a lab experimenting with these things that stick together. Velcro was created by a guy walking his dog. So we talked about dogs a moment ago. A guy in Switzerland's walking his dogs through the Alps. He notices his dog is covered with burrs. That's probably happened for 30,000 years. That's how long people have had dogs like that. He decides burrs are awesome. God, this is incredible. How could my dog just brush against it and it sticks to him? Takes the burr off, looks at it under a microscope. He goes, whoa, it's even more awesome than I imagined. Burrs are like hooks that just kind of lock into you. I bet there are applications to that. Applications, yes. Today, there's over 100,000 categories of products that use Velcro. Wow. And that's how Velcro was invented. It wasn't like a out of the blue thing. It was a guy paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
I believe all your listeners can pay attention. They just got to get out and pay attention.
Pay attention to the right things too. Speaking of the next one, then, I think that works well with humility. How does humility help us spot these breakthroughs in our e-commerce businesses?
Okay, good. So I started a business. I started it because, damn, I'm smart, And so now we need to do some new things. And I could either say, damn, I'm the smartest guy on the planet. I started this business. Or I could say, I kind of was really smart, but all of us are a little bit lucky, of starting a business and growing it is a function of not only knowing what you're doing, but good timing and good marketing, good customers. So I could say instead, well, I don't know all the answers. There are new things we could do. I don't exactly know how to do them. I should be humble about the fact that I don't know everything, and that together as a team, we'll figure out the next generation of what we do. But I think, unfortunately, humility for most leaders is like a bad look. We hire people, they expect us to know everything, right? Actually, they don't. They expect us to lead us to be awesome. And so part of that is admitting I don't know everything, but not in a, I got a little bit of pushback when I first suggested the idea of the wisdom of ignorance. People said, well, it's not good to not know things. And I said, let's differentiate stupidity from what I call enlightened ignorance. Okay. We're surrounded by stupidity. Okay. Sure. I'm not certain wherever people live right now who are listening, whether they'll be in a state that allows you to get a vaccine. Okay. Vaccines are actually brilliant. Okay, no matter what the current federal government says. Vaccines have saved more millions of lives than anything else going on there, okay? So I'm not talking about stupidity or saying science is stupid or not paying attention. I'm talking about a kind of ignorance that challenges us to be better, that challenges us to be humble and say, I don't know the answer, or I don't know the best answer to that. Let us as a team find the best answer to that. So that to me is what humility is all about. Humility sometimes is, I need to do better, okay? So think about it. Some of your audience may shop at Patagonia. And so Patagonia is now kind of renowned as a company that sells sustainable kind of products for engaging with the outdoors. Patagonia it started as a company that sold basically rock climbing supplies. And a lot of its initial supplies were supplies that actually damaged the rock. It was a way to hold steady in the rock. We banged kind of our anchors into the rock, and then we climbed the rock. The founders of Patagonia said, we love the environment. Why would we injure the environment? Let's rethink what we do and offer. And so they created new ways of climbing that actually didn't damage nature. And so that was a sense of humility. We're not doing it the right way. We can do a better job. So I love the whole notion of either I don't have all the answers, or there must be a better and more sustainable way to do the stuff that we do. Or maybe we should be offering different things that are more valuable to people, or maybe we should be more helpful to people, not just in what we offer, but the results that they get out of it.
So let's go into future focus then, because I think this is an interesting one. It leads into a lot of what's going on with e-commerce right now, because there's a lot of things shaking up, AI being one of them. How do we build future focused thinking into our e-commerce brands?
Okay, good. So again, and I don't want to sound like a bit of a broken record, but I believe the absolute best thing that anyone in any company can do is periodically get up and pay attention. Okay. So I believe that we're not future focused when we don't pay attention, and that the future, while we don't know exactly what it is constantly sending us clues. But we got to get out there and pay attention to those clues. Okay. So we can look at all the other e-commerce brands and see what they're doing, and are they doing things that are different? Have they tweaked their business model? Have they made it more responsive? How are they using AI in ways that people like? How are they using AI in ways that kind of piss off their
Mhm.
customers. So we can pay attention to that. But more importantly, let's pay attention to the world as it wanders by us. And let's do that where we live and then when we travel. So here, just my iPhone, okay? Sweden, where my wife is from and where we spend half of every summer, is now a cashless society. So you go to a
Really?
bank and you say, I'd like to deposit some money. And the banker says, oh, no, this is a bank. We don't have money here. And I go, okay, time out. I'm an old guy. Let me understand that. And they go, no, all the money we have here is like electronically done. You can't get cash here.
Wow.
And similarly, I can't buy a ticket other than using my phone to go on public transportation. So I have an app for the public transportation. It's kind of on the honor system, but I log in when I'm about to get on a train and I buy a ticket because the ticket's good for 90 minutes. Everything is here, okay? So they've made it kind of easy. Once I get over the fact that I need to up my game, they've made it really easy. Everything is here. There's an app for everything. So I think about I should be paying attention to that, okay? So there should be an app for everything. So I run an e-commerce business, but I also probably have an app that's going to be more interesting than just a listing of the products and services that I sell. And so I want people to be as successful as possible with the things they buy from me. I want them to get the most value out of it. So I'm going to drive information to them. So I want to share wisdom about it. I want to share things to do and not do. I want to get them to imagine how this product is the launching pad for some of their other aspirations. And I can do it using technology, but I got to go out and see how other people are using technology. And so, I go into a museum. It used to be you'd go into a museum and they'd say, do you want to buy the headphones? And I'd go, well, I guess I could do that. Now they don't say that. They say, do you want to download the tour on your phone? And I go, well, I have my phone. I'm used to my phone. Sadly, I'm holding my phone a lot. Let me kind of download this, so they've gotten with the program and they're kind of a public institution. My guess is your audience could get with the program, but get out there, pay attention, see how people are using technology, see how it works and doesn't work, see what new trends are happening. So technology, customer trends, market trends, what's kind of popular now. Look at all those things. That gives you a clue to where the future's going. Then try to move your business in the direction of that. We have such luxury now because we can get out of the office. A lot of the people who are listening may be working remotely. They can wander around and compare notes on what they saw from different places they're in. They can also go online, whether they use Google or ChatGPT or Claude AI, which is my favorite, but I shouldn't plug anything here.
That's a good one.
Yeah, but whatever they use, they can use that as a start for thinking about it. I want to explore my city. I live in San Francisco. I want to explore my city. Can you share with me 5 kind of hip new businesses that are really popular now? What's really exciting about these businesses? I get 5 ideas. I go to these places and kind of hang out
I like that.
and see what's going on. So, no, I just feel like there's no excuse for not engaging the world, and any entrepreneur should be doing that regularly. It is so presumptuous to think that being brilliant today assures us being brilliant tomorrow, but paying attention to the world assures us we can be brilliant tomorrow.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I just want to frame, I don't expect you to get this right, but I want to use it as a way to kind of gauge where things are. If you had to guess, what percent does e-commerce make up of total retail revenue in the U.S.?
Okay, so that's, I would say it makes up 90% of my personal spend.
Sure.
In terms of total revenue, this is a big country with a lot of unwashed, uninformed, I don't know, 15 to 20%.
You are remarkably better than most people. Yeah, it's probably right around 20%. But you ask most people and they're like, it's got to be 70%, 80%, right? Because they think about it in the terms of their lives. But
Right.
yeah, it's about 20%. And that's growing at a very, very fast rate, right? And so we can see this e-commerce is still in its infancy and it's going to grow a lot more. So that's something to be aware for the future of e-commerce. But what I think a lot of e-commerce, I would say, what's the blind spot to e-commerce? It's going back into this offline, you know, experiences as well. I've got some Gen Alpha kids, and them and their friends want to go hang out at the mall. And this is a thing that, you know, maybe we used to say malls are dying. No, not anymore. Not the way if you talk to Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha says, well, we like to buy commodities on Amazon, but otherwise we like the experience of going to the mall. We want to buy things. We want to see them, hold them, feel them, because so much of their life already exists online. Anyways, they crave these in-person experiences. And so if you're an e-commerce brand, I would say one blind spot to be aware of that I see a lot of e-commerce brands having is making sure how are you curating offline experiences, you know, storefronts, but also just experiences outside of storefronts as well.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. And so I think that's part of the huge upside. I would like to think e-commerce grows, but that people still long for these experiences, and that on both sides we need to up our game. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the traditional mall isn't going to win in the future. I mean, we're seeing those decline. So malls have to be more interesting, right?
Right.
And so malls have to have entertainment. They have to have some reasons to draw us there.
Yep.
And we need to think quite honestly about what are the things people are buying in other places where they just believe I have to go to a physical place to buy them. And some of those things we're not going to compete with. Some of those things we want to kick the tires, right? So I'm probably going to buy a new wheelbarrow online, but I'm probably going to Home Depot to actually try some out, because online I can't try them out. Now, I could try them out if they put some videos up of people who work in their business using different wheelbarrows side by side. Then I might be willing to push the button and buy then. But in the absence of that, I'm going to an actual physical store to try it out.
Yeah, the video's not as fun. It's still actually fun to go to there and just like wheel around the aisles a little bit.
I think
right?
it is. Yeah. So we don't need to try and win those customers, but we do need to be the best at what we do. And we do need to, for what customers want from an e-commerce experience, we need to create a better experience there, because in that respect, we're competing against other e-commerce providers. There's certain ways we're not going to compete with a brick and mortar. You know, I use Uber Eats not as often because I love to go to restaurants. Okay. And they could be delivering the same food a little bit colder than I'd get it at the restaurant. But the reality is I like to go to the restaurant, and I can look at pictures of the restaurant's food online. It's not making it happen for me because it doesn't smell or taste there. So I think there are a bunch of things which hopefully we'll still have, but that doesn't mean there isn't a huge upside for e-commerce. And as you said, anything that's kind of a commodity, I'm going to buy it at a place where I can get it faster and pay the best price. Having said that, you know, I'm an author. This is my new book here. But the reality is I do like people to go to bookstores. The fact that Amazon sells like 80% of business books, that's not super helpful to me, because at a bookstore, I'm on the new nonfiction book table and somebody can say, God, that's a beautiful cover. And that's an intriguing title. Should I pick this book up? But on Amazon, unless I buy ads on Amazon and they send people in my direction and then they click on look inside this book, they're not going to find out about me. Plus, I like bookstores. You know, part of life and part of business, we've been talking about it, you know, part of it is having a purpose and having a plan, but part of it is serendipity, okay? I don't know who I'm going to meet who could be a customer. Unless I get out there and engage with a lot of people. I don't know who's going to be interested in my book, or I don't know what books I'm going to be interested in, unless I go out there and go, wow, they put that on the table. That's really interesting to me. And so I want a fair bit of serendipity. Can we on e-commerce sites create serendipity? We probably can, but we need to think differently about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, good news for you. I like bookstores and I like physical books. I have my bookshelf back there with all the physical books. I used to get some ebooks. I just don't like them as much. I want the physical book. And I'm proud of that, maybe because I spend most of my day behind a computer screen or my phone screen as well. And so if I get a chance to break away, I like to.
Well, I'm hoping your listeners are the same way, or I'm hoping they like physical books or audiobooks. I don't want them to get an electronic. I've actually read the audiobook for The Wisdom of Ignorance.
Cool. You're the voice for it.
I'm the voice.
I think that's special when the author is the voice.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that's more appealing. My wife only listens to audiobooks. And so I want to say I did it for her. No, I did it because audiobooks are growing. We're all busy. And that's another thing that's going on in the future, right? We're all busy. And so you see more people listening to podcasts while they're jogging or walking. Sure. You see more people reading books while they're walking or jogging or on the bus or the subway or in their car. And so I wanted an audiobook because that's a growing part of the market. As an author, I could have said, just create a regular book or let Audible, owned by Amazon, find some out-of-work actor who doesn't care about my content to read my book. But my view is people need to have an authentic experience, whether they're buying the physical book or they're listening to it. In terms of the ebook, I don't know. Some people are going to do that. I'm okay with that, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fine.
I want to take a little bit of a moment to get to know who is Alan Gregerman, because I think it's fun to get to know the human being behind the book. As a kid, you told me that you would sit on the floor with atlases asking endless questions about the world. How did curiosity shape who you are, and then lead you to be the person that writes a book about the wisdom of ignorance?
No, I mean, that's fair. First, I want to say I believe everyone's curious, but I believe depending on kind of how we grew up and what we were told by school or parents about what was important, a lot of us lost the knack for being curious. Sure. So my mom was a world history teacher. My first gift present that I remember is like a Hammond World Atlas. Not the best World Atlas, but it was okay. I used to sit on the floor of our den and I would thumb through pages looking at places, and I would point to places and I would say to my parents, what goes on in this place? And they would go, we have no idea. I say, have you ever been there? My parents were relatively poor growing up. They hadn't, when I was a child, ever left America, And so, but my parents would always say, I bet it's interesting. Why don't you try and learn more? And someday maybe you'll go there. And so the reality was, for me, I always imagined this is like a big world, and the world is filled with people with lots of ideas, and I would benefit from knowing a lot of those ideas. The reality is we get stuck thinking that what we know and who we hang out with are kind of the things we need to know. And that's not really true. So I do a lot of consulting with pharmaceutical companies. I'm in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and in the center of the city is the Malaysian National Herb Garden. So I don't know how many people who are listening have been to an herb garden. This herb garden has 400 herbs that people have used for thousands of years because they didn't have pharmaceuticals, okay? Actually, some of them worked. Actually, some pharmaceuticals are based on these herbs. And so the reality is people knew a long time ago things that were pretty useful for us to know. I mentioned my wife is from Sweden. So Sweden has, it's an evil in America, socialized medicine. Well, let's break that one down because that's a misnomer. We've been told it's kind of bad. What does socialized medicine mean? It means the government pays for healthcare. What's the government's incentive if it's paying for healthcare is to have you not need a lot of healthcare, have you be healthy. Is there anyone listening to this podcast who wouldn't prefer to be healthy over going to a doctor? Okay. So the Swedish government pays for aerobics instructors to go to every town in Sweden in the summer and lead free public aerobics workshops.
Wow.
Their view is if you stay fit and healthy and active, you won't be a burden on the healthcare system. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? To my mind, it's kind of a good idea. I'm striving to be as healthy as possible. I'm not trying to see as many doctors as I can, but our system is the more I go to a doctor, the more I contribute to GDP. Okay. So I'm trying to, so I don't want to keep the economy going by not being healthy. Okay.
Sure.
So the world is filled with ideas. And so and from a young age, I just said, God, I would like to meet people in all these places and explore. And fortunately, in my work, I get to travel because I speak a lot about these ideas. And I've been fortunate enough to speak in like 35 different countries. But I get to travel and I hang out there, actually. I don't just go someplace, fly in. But I go there and then I say, good, I'm going to spend a few days and actually get to know some of the things that these people know. So I've been kind of curious about that. I've always been curious about it. In college, I majored in geography. Okay. And so
surprise.
well, yeah, no, but I was in a department, there were like 10 majors and 12 full like professors. Like I got a lot of attention, but geography to me was the study of places and why people think and do different things. I remember one of my college roommates was going to be a lawyer. He was studying political science. I got invited to their house for Thanksgiving. His dad, very prominent lawyer. And he said, so Alan, what are you studying? And I said, I'm studying geography. And he goes, do you know all the state capitals? And I said, well, I actually know all the state capitals, but I'm not studying geography to win a trivia contest.
Sure.
I'm actually studying it to have an idea of how the world works. But so I studied geography. I actually have a PhD in geography.
Wow.
I'm actually really into geography. But having said that, I've always been interested in the fact that the world is full of so many ideas, human ideas, things found in nature. Why wouldn't I want to kind of learn and know those things? And then it turned out when I started my consulting firm, this was actually really cool to know because I could then say, have you thought about this? Or do you know that these people in this part of the world do this? Or have you thought about kind of how this thing in nature, there's now a whole field that we call biomimicry, and that's where people are trying to figure out things that go on in nature that can be applied to products or business processes. I use that in what I do, and I'm not an expert in it. A big company came to us and said, we want to reduce the cost of packaging our products worldwide. This is huge, like a $20 billion company. They said, people have told us you're reasonably clever. You think differently. Can you help us? And I said, yeah, who's going to work on this? They assigned a team. I took them to a produce market. We didn't even meet in an office. They said, you need a conference room. And I go, eventually, I took them to a produce market. I gave them each $20. I said, I want you to buy everything that you find in this produce market within your $20 budget that actually protects its product really, really well. And we took all these back: pomegranates, oranges, bananas do a good job, but bananas ripen too fast. And then we took all these things apart and we started writing notes about what makes these things remarkable. And then we started to design the next generation of their packaging based on things we found in nature. They saved $155 million a year in packaging their products and had less breakage. So to my mind, like the world is, I don't want to say the world is our oyster, but because is it an R month? Yeah, September is an R month. No, but for those of your listeners, you're supposed to, in a cold weather climate, you're supposed to only eat oysters in months that have an R in their name. So not in the dead of summer. Okay. But I just believe there's so many cool ideas out there. Why not try and capture those? Why not be engaged with them? And in the process, we start to figure out where we need to get to, what we need to aspire to be. Did I answer your question? I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, I think I've share your love and curiosity for different peoples and nations and language and culture, and maybe less on the geography side, although I appreciate it, but maybe not to the PhD level. But yeah, I can remember even as a kid, I want to say it was maybe third or fourth grade, I rented every book that our school library had about Japanese, right? And then then I went through every book that they had about Australia and everything that I possibly could. I have to ask though, speaking in 35 countries, Is there one that surprised you or something that you're like, this I didn't expect, but I was pleasantly surprised and enjoyed it? Or maybe there was an experience there where you're like, I was treated exceptionally well. I really liked that, I they gave me all the blue M&Ms or whatever. I don't know, right? But it's like, is there an experience here from one of these countries that you're like, this was unexpected?
I, you know, I don't want to say, because of course my wife is from Sweden, but I have to admit, in some places, um, people might really like what you talk about, but you get very little outward kind of sense. So
Sure.
Swedes are very proper. They never interrupt. They don't show, this is a stereotype, of course,
For
but they
sure.
tend not to show a lot of emotion about things. So you can talk about things, and I tend to be kind of energetic and a little bit dramatic. I use only props when I speak. I don't have a PowerPoint. And so I bring like things on stage that are to begin a story. Um, and so the fact that Swedes didn't respond a lot, and then at the end came up and said, that was the best presentation we've ever heard, that was a little bit funny to me. I
That's
tend
good.
to like places where people are a little bit more outgoing and engaged. Um, and so I've really enjoyed speaking in Turkey, where people are
Mhm.
really hungry for new ideas and really excited about implementing them. I've enjoyed speaking in India, where people are really looking for ideas that will help them. A very entrepreneurial country. Uh, I don't know. I want to say, I shouldn't say this, the farther south you go, the more lively people are.
Sure.
The farther north you go, the more they all speak English better than I do. But um,
That's true
the
too.
thing, though, underlying what you've asked, though, is an important thing that I'd like people to think about. And that is, as humans, we're 99.3% the same. That's
Mm.
science. Um, and so the reality is, the ideas I talk about innate gifts that humans have, people have them everywhere. Some cultures may emphasize them more or emphasize them less, but as humans, we all, as you said, we all have the desire to make a difference. We all
Mhm.
have the desire to be curious. We all can be humble. We began by being humble. We didn't know anything. Imagine when we all tried to ride a bicycle. What a humbling experience, because we fell on a lot of our parts and skinned a lot of our knees. We didn't know how to do it, but we persevered.
Mhm.
But we all have these abilities. We all have the ability to be respectful of others. We all have the ability to think about the future. We all definitely have the ability to be paranoid. We're almost exactly the same, but we tend to identify the 0.7% of other people that's different than us before we ever
Mhm.
acknowledge that we're the same. And so when we do this, we find reasons why we don't collaborate. They shouldn't be our customers. I shouldn't hire that person because they're a different background. They have an accent. They are a different age. They're a different color than me. They have a different religion than me. They grew up in a different place, whatever the case is. I like people to think about um, that we should use our similarities as the glue that brings us together, then use our differences as the raw material for doing new things as we bring different perspectives. But I mention this because as I travel around and speak, I'm talking about things I hope that are human. I'm talking about the power of all of us to be smarter, the power of all of us to unlock our genius, to be more curious, and to create breakthroughs that make our businesses and the world a better place. I don't think there's a single place on earth where a regular person doesn't resonate with those ideas. I mean, that's my hope. So I get a different response, of course, in lots of different places based on their personality. But I feel at the end of the day, and it's either because the audience gives me feedback or somebody comes up afterwards, that I'm kind of connecting with people. And so
Mhm.
then the other thing is, everybody or most of the people who are listening probably had to sit through a statistics class in college or high school. And remember, in statistics, they told you about something called the normal distribution. It's actually called the
Mhm.
Gaussian curve. It's like a 200-year-old idea. And the idea was that at each extreme, there are um, There are people who are either like remarkably excellent at something or remarkably not so excellent at something. And the large 80% of people are kind of in the middle. And I used to say, what a bogus idea. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Well, the reality is this. I find with every audience that 10% of people are like super enthusiastic about these ideas. And they say to themselves, I'm going to go back and try and figure out how to implement these ideas at my business. 10% of people, it's like, why am I here? Isn't it time to meet at the bar? And the other 80% are like the unwashed masses. You're trying to get some of them to come over to this side of the normal distribution. If I can get 10% of people in any country to be super excited about my ideas and willing to try something, I'm feeling great. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the 10% who don't want to be there, I apologize for you being invited to the event. I'm sorry about that. And the people in the middle, I'm trying to win some of you over. You're a source of great kind of upside. You were talking about the upside for e-commerce businesses as a speaker. Those folks in the middle, they're my upside. Yeah, so that's it. But no, I've loved everywhere I've spoken. I try to customize what I do. Of course, I'm going to spend some time and learn about the place, so that it's so that what I talk about is relevant. And yeah, so I've loved it all. And certainly, would I love people to give me a standing O? Oh yeah, sure. There are certain countries where they're more likely to do that. Probably because they've been deprived of good speakers, so if I'm credible, no, it's all
self-deprecation. No, I'm not allowing it.
It's all fun, so it's all good. But no, I mean, I like to speak. I like to share ideas. I like to learn from the audience. I like to tailor what I do. Every speech gives me an opportunity to learn something new. And every new place I go to gives me an opportunity to learn something new. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. You obviously you talked a lot about Sweden there. One of my favorite things about learning other cultures is learning languages. It's just something special. There was a time I was a nurse, and so it was always nice when you could speak a little bit of the language of somebody that was there.
Yes, at a really challenging time. I mean, if they have somebody who can speak to them.
And so I don't remember a lot of Swedish. So hopefully this one doesn't offend you when I say it, because it's the only one I remember with Jag älskar dig, right?
Yeah.
I love you.
Well, that's for the right person a really good thing to say. Yes. Yeah. And you have 3 dogs. So let me tell you, when we sing the birthday song in Swedish, which is Ja må hon leva, the dogs start howling. And so go online, find the kind of words in the sheet music for happy birthday in Swedish. Just sing it to your dogs. I tell you,
I will give that a shot.
It'll drive them nuts. No,
that's funny.
But I think, let's be honest. I mean, I would love to speak a lot of languages. In a lot of countries, they're so good in English, and most of my ideas I've come up with in English. So, so they see that and they say, no, that's okay. You can speak in English. It'd be better for us. And then in other countries, if they don't speak as much English, they're willing to work with you as you kind of butcher their language. And I try. Our son lives in Spain. I try my best in Spanish. They work with me, because they're much more patient than other people are. Yeah, but it's good. And it's remember, when you cut through, so I'm riding on a commuter train getting into Istanbul. The commuter train is elevated. So picture that. Okay. It's an old train. I'm standing up because it's packed, and the doors swing open, and it's like we're hanging like 100 feet above the ground. And an older woman tugs on my sweater and says in Turkish, what I now know because a young man came to help me, don't worry, it'll be okay. This happens a lot here. And we get out at the station. I walk with her. I thank her profusely. The young man stays with me. He's kind of the interpreter. And then we have a conversation. And in that conversation, I ask her about her life. She tells me she has grandchildren, her grandchildren kind of the age of my kids. I ask her what she likes. She says family matters to her, community matters to her. She loves to cook. Family and community matter to me. I love to cook. I asked her what she's doing. She said she's going in town to go to a museum. I said, well, tell me, I love museums. And in that moment, she spoke Turkish. I spoke English. We had a young man interpreting for us for like 20 minutes. And I realized this 80-year-old Turkish woman is so much like me. Mm. And then I said to him, I know she's a Muslim woman, but I'd like to give her a hug before I leave. Is that okay? And he asks her, and she gives me a big hug. And suddenly I make a human connection, okay? And so I'm all about, in my speaking, and I hope in my life and with my books, making a connection. And I'm trying to talk about things that I believe are universal. But of course, I believe that for entrepreneurs and e-commerce entrepreneurs, this stuff really matters, of course. But I'd like to think that in some way, some of these ideas are going to help somebody think differently about their business or their personal life or the world they're in.
You know, you talking about this reminds me of, there's a speaker named Louis Giglio, and he talks about how the sun has light. The moon has no light of its own, right? The moon is just a ball of dirt.
Reflected, right?
Yeah. And the only reason we see light from the moon is because it's reflecting the sun. Its job is to just sit in the way of the sun to reflect the light to Earth, right? Similarly, at least in my belief, we were created from the dust of the earth. So I'm no more than a moon, right? Like I don't have necessarily a light of my own. My job says we were created in the image of God. Like this is what I believe, right? And so I believe that we were created in the image of God. And so we are reflections of him. And to your point, every single one of us, we're just different facets of the same image bearer, right? Like we're just different facets of this reflection of a creator, a loving creator. And so to look downwardly at anybody because of any of these small, insignificant differences, it just doesn't make any sense. Because it's looking down on the very thing that created you, right?
Right. And no, we should honor the fact that we're pretty similar to other people and then be super respectful of the fact that there's some things that are different about them that will be worth me knowing.
Yeah.
Maybe they look at the world differently. I mean, you know, we spend so much time with stuff, and not that folks shouldn't buy stuff from the folks who listen to your podcast, but we're so focused on stuff. Like I had to take my car in, somebody hit my car. I needed a new battery for my electric bicycle. I had to go and do that. You walk through rural places in what we call developing countries. They're in some ways more developed than us. And you get invited to people's homes, which are relatively modest, and they would literally give you half of everything they had. You know, they have a totally different idea about that. And we're so focused on our stuff, and they're focused on connecting with other human beings. And we need to be more that way.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Alan, it has been so fun talking to you, getting to know you, learning from you. If people want to connect with you, follow you, read your book, what's the best way for them to get in touch, stay in touch?
Yeah. So I'll spell it out, though. Maybe you'll put it in notes as well. But
I will.
Certainly go to my website, which is Alan Gregerman, AlanGregerman.com. And there you'll not only find out what I'm up to, you'll find out about my books. And then I have some, I don't want to say thought leadership. I have thoughts. You know, the website designer said you should call it thought leadership. I have thoughts, and I put them up there. I blog and do other things. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Alan Gregerman, and do that. Connect with me. Don't just follow me. Connect with me. I'd be delighted to learn what you're up to. And so you can do that for sure. I'd love it, of course, if you buy my newest book, The Wisdom of Ignorance. I believe it's valuable, you know, but I'll make this offer. If you read it and don't find it to be valuable, I'll buy it back from you.
Wow.
You know, so I love the idea. It's one more idea I'll share with your audience, and that's the idea of an unconditional guarantee of satisfaction. We've had that for 37 years in our consulting business. LL Bean had it for 107 years until they gave up on it. Think about what you do that matters, and think about if you can guarantee the experience or what you offer to people. And so I'll guarantee my book. I mean, I put it out there in the world. So those are all the ways you can find me. You can Google me on Google or whatever. Just put my name there. A lot of things will pop up. So that's
wonderful.
Probably enough.
Well, thank you again for your time, sharing your wisdom with us. It's been a lot of fun talking to you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Well, thank you. I've really loved the conversation, and I really appreciate the chance to be on your podcast. Thanks a million.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.